Welcome to the 21-22 school year. My name is Janet Gorton. I'm the Director of English Learner Programs. I'm going to share with you some information today to help get the year started with your English learners. Norman Public Schools' mission for non-English speaking families in regards to communication is that we recognize that communication is essential to the educational process, so we will make every reasonable effort to provide language services and supports in order to communicate with parents who possess limited English proficiency. We have interpreters available to help with this communication. Interpreters serve as a conduit rendering into the needed language literally what has been stated in English. They may not edit, add, omit information, and then they interpret into English questions asked by families for school personnel to answer. There are a couple kinds of interpreters that we can access. The first one are interpreters that can meet virtually or in person with you and a parent in order to support communication. And I'm going to show you very quickly how you can access the request for that. So if you go to the Norman Public Schools webpage, and up here at the top, there's a user option. Sign in using your login information, and you will now have access to the staff portal. Click on that tile, and on the left you can find a line that says quick links. If you click on that and scroll down a ways, you will see something called request an interpreter. That link will take you to a Google form where you can enter the information for an upcoming meeting. You can select your preference for what kind of meeting, what language is needed, the purpose, etc. And we will do our best to provide you with an interpreter who can facilitate that conversation. The other thing we have available is we have a phone interpreter service. And so if either we cannot provide you an interpreter to help with a meeting, or you have something that's urgent that you need to contact a parent about, you can use the phone interpreter service. The EL staff person at your site, a secretary or an administrator can give you the information. So when you use an interpreter, it's important to remember that actually your audience are the parents you're speaking to, not the interpreter. So if you're in person, for example, you can make eye contact with the parents, say the things you need to say, and the interpreter will change that message into the needed language. It's important that you pause frequently. Sometimes we get carried away in what we're saying, and if we do that, it can often be difficult for the interpreter to keep track of everything that they need to translate. And if you're using documents, the simpler the better in providing explanations to parents. A couple other communication tools that are really helpful. One is Google Docs. This would help with written communication, and I will show you that very quickly. I've already got a Google Doc pulled up. If you go to Tools, select Translate Document, it will ask you to rename it. So I usually just enter the language that I'm choosing. Select the language, and there are many, many languages here. So I'm going to scroll down to Spanish, translate, and in a few seconds it will translate the document into the needed language. Now, it will not be perfect, but it will certainly help with the communication. You can also, I've copied and pasted things from other places and put it in a Google Doc just so I could use this tool. Sometimes it translates things we don't want translated, like this is supposed to be 131 South Flood. We wouldn't normally translate a street name. That would not help a family find the location. So I might go back and hand type in what that is supposed to be, but it will help with the communication aspect. Pretty easy to use. And then many of you are familiar with School Status. School Status has a function where you can send a message in a different language, and I'll show you that really quickly. This is my child, so it's okay. So I'm going to do a new message. I will send one to myself. So here's all the contact information. Select me. And then I'm just going to write a quick message. Welcome back. I can't wait to meet you. And then I can translate it into any language. So today we'll translate into French. And now it says it in French. I hit send. and now the recipient receives it in another language. Extremely easy to use, and I know many of you use this feature. I know that there are other tools out there that sometimes people use too, like Remind has a feature similar to this, but School Status is one that is sponsored by the district. If you need help with School Status or need access to it, talk to your site principal or the EL staff, and they'll be happy to assist you with that. If you go to Infinite Campus, at the very top, there are a bunch of different kinds of flags. One of the flags that we enter is Family Needs Language Assistance. So if you look at Infinite Campus on a student's demographic page, that may help you know that a family may need some assistance when you communicate with them. So what happens at the beginning of the year with the English Learner Program? It all starts with the home language survey. When new students enter the district, which includes all kindergarten students, every family must complete a home language survey. On that survey are 3 questions that ask them about their language background. If one of the answers to those questions is a language other than English, then the EL staff has 30 calendar days to screen them with an approved screener. And if they meet criteria, certain criteria, then parents are notified about the availability of services. So 30 days is not very long when we have a lot of new students to screen. So that's the beginning part. And then similar to IEPs for all special education students, EL students are required to have what's called an ELAP, an English Language Academic Plan. Very similar. We put learning goals for the year, testing accommodations, potential classroom modifications. Those are all housed on the ELAP. Then you have access to that through Elevation, which I'll mention in a moment, if you have an EL student in your classroom. And your EL teacher is also a great resource for information regarding especially classroom modifications. And all of these things are dictated by federal and state law. So language and content expectations are closely related, and as grade level learning goals become more complex, every student needs support and training, so to speak, to clear the hurdles. So what are some things that you can do in the classroom? Well, here are some instructional supports that yield great results, and they're not just for your English learners, there's for every student in your classroom, and most of this all of you do all the time. Modeling, really important to provide concrete examples of what the end outcome should look like, whether written, whether a presentation. If we give students some concrete end goals, that will really help them achieve what you want them to achieve and show what they know. Repetitive language, it can be very boring for us, but for students learning a language, it's that repetition of language in context that's going to help them acquire it and help it stick for future. Clear directions, it's always important. Oral and written directions are very clear, very bulleted, so that we're sure that we are very concise in what our expectations are and how students are supposed to go about doing something. Graphic organizers and visual aids, always helpful in making learning more concrete. Sentence starters, lots of students have a hard time forming thoughts, either written or verbally, from the air. If we give them a starting point, I think that, I see that the character is anything that you want to say. Give them something to start with, and it really helps them put their thoughts out there. Because often we assume when they don't express their thoughts, they don't have thoughts. Well, they have thoughts, they just don't have the words to put them out there. So let's give them some words to get them started. And your EL teachers have a whole list of sentence starters that might be helpful for you. And then, of course, in your content area, providing explicit instruction of key vocabulary. Let's give students an opportunity to engage in content. We have to do that by not assuming they know certain words. We know what those important words are in what we're doing that will help them access meaning. Let's make sure every student knows what those words are. Awarding grades to EL students. If a classroom teacher is providing the recommended accommodations, then EL students should receive the grade that they earn. We just want to make sure that EL students have equal access to the content. And then sometimes when we ask them to demonstrate mastery, we have to give them different ways of showing what they know. They may not be able to write a 5-paragraph essay yet. They may not be able to write a paragraph yet. So let's give them different ways to express their knowledge. If we have students, especially our newcomer students who have very limited English so far, it's often beneficial to them to put them on an alternative grading scale, an SU scale, so that if they're attempting work, we can show that they're progressing, then they would get an S. but the EL teacher will talk to you specifically if that is something that we think is in the best interest of the student. And that, for example, in elementary grade levels, it may not be for every content area. It may just be for language arts and social studies, but science and math are fine. So, and we can kind of pick and choose which areas a student needs most support on. I mentioned this before, Elevation is a platform we use to house the ELAPs and to keep track of our English learners. By law, once English learners have met the exit criteria for Oklahoma, we have to monitor them 3 times a year for 4 years after they exit. And that's just to make sure that they're able to maintain their ability to be successful in the classroom. So we complete monitoring through Elevation. If you ever receive an email from Elevation, don't delete it. 3 times a year, you receive an email for those exited English learners in your classrooms that asks you questions. It's how we monitor their progress. Your EL teachers at your sites are amazing resources for you. Please do not hesitate to reach out to them or to me if you have any questions. We would love to help you. Thanks for all you do, and I wish you a great start to the school year.